Well, as we've been discussing throughout the week, Turkcell has filed a court case in South Africa that's against the number 2 cell phone provider, MTN. Joining us to discuss the case is Eric van den Berg, who's a partner at Fasken Martineau, and he'll be representing, or the firm will rather be representing Turkcell during the proceedings. Eric, thanks for coming through. Just by way of completeness, we have been asking MTN to participate. In fact, up until about 45 minutes ago, they were coming, and the legal counsel from MTN has been called to an internal meeting, which one presumes is extremely urgent because they are sitting here defenseless, and that's their problem. But as far as you're concerned, we need to go through the facts of the matter and the reason why Turkcell is suing MTN in the South African courts. So quite a lot of ground to cover. Just to go back, though, the basis of your claim is that a gentleman who worked for MTN called Chris Kilawan has made certain allegations. He worked for MTN in Iran from 2004 to 2007. How did he come to Turkcell in the first place?
It's quite a long story, as I understand. But contact was made with him sort of in about December 2010 by a representative of Turkcell, and over a series of meetings in December, the beginnings of the story came out. It was quite a bit later, February, March, and almost into October of the following year, where he was properly recognized, debriefed by various other legal representatives of Turkcell. So I think they're also represented by DLA Piper in Paris, Patton Boggs in Washington. So in a series of meetings, they managed to get to see some of the documentation that he had, the sham contracts with Aristo Oil. Those kinds of things started to emerge. What the period was between 2007 and 2010, I'm not sure why there was that lengthy period of silence, but he may well at that stage not have wanted to talk. I understand that he's a fairly up until 2010 was a fairly reluctant and recalcitrant person in coming forward.
What changed his mind?
As I understand, it relates primarily to the money that was paid to the South African ambassador to Iran, to Mr. Saligi, money which he paid out of his own pocket and which he was seeking to recover from MTN.
The basis of this, though, and let's just unpack this quickly, there was a guy called Musa. I'm not going to use the surnames because they are terribly long. So Musa was introduced to Chris Kilawan, your star witness, by an Iranian official called Javed. Nobody disputes that. Chris Kilawan then used an MTN company to pay $400,000 to Musa, presumably to
that's the Aristo Oil.
To Javed through Aristo Oil. So everybody agrees $400,000 has been paid to Aristo Oil, to the Iranian officials, through the Iranian official's friend. The dispute, or the MTN side of it, is that Judge Hoffman looked into this and he called Kilawan and Musa unreliable witnesses. What makes you think they are reliable?
There's quite a lot of background documentation which ought to be available. Hoffman never interviewed Kilawan. What he relied on was his deposition in the United States, and as I understand it, I haven't read Hoffman in any great detail, but as I understand it, there was reference also made to evidence which he gave in one of the other arbitrations. He didn't give it to ICC, but at the BIT he certainly would have testified, and so that was available, and then Patton Boggs made available to Hoffman various other documentation. So really just relying on the statement and what they say, the inconsistencies between what he says and the documentation. They say it's a fabric of lies and distortions, and that he's a conspiracy theorist.
An unreliable witness.
And an unreliable witness. Well, our experience of him is not that, but he will have to get into a witness box, and he'll have to withstand cross-examination, and I'm sure that that's going to be a fairly rigorous process.
Why go to the United States first?
I think, as I understand from Patton Boggs and as I understand from counsel who represented them there was an argument, a proper argument to be made that the United States courts had jurisdiction. There was a recent Supreme Court decision, I think called Kerbel, which then said they don't have jurisdiction. That had a whole argument based on MTN funds passing through America, and then of course there's the sort of the United States Iranian unhappiness. So that would have, you know, from a litigation perspective, that would have been a good place to litigate it.
And now the move to a South African court, does that perhaps show confidence maybe in South Africa's legal system from a Turkcell's perspective?
Turkcell have had meetings with a number of different South African lawyers, including myself. They certainly asked questions about our legal process and about the reliability of our courts. And the things that we would have said, what I certainly said to them, is that it's a slow process. It can be much quicker. Hopefully there will be changes here, particularly around road accident fund type litigation, which should speed the process up. But I mean, our courts, I think, they work.
What are they hoping to achieve?
What are they hoping to achieve?
Do they want the license in Iran?
They can't get the license in Iran through this litigation. This is a damages claim. It's based in delict. It's based on a delict called interference with contract, and they seek to recover the profits that they have lost, would have made in Iran, and that's the number of 4.2 US billion.
And how have they worked that out?
It's primarily based on the profits that MTN have made. Remember that MTN stepped right into Turkcell's shoes. So it's the same business plan, it's the same business model.
Go back a little. What was the situation before the alleged bribe was paid?
The situation was that Turkcell had won the tender. There were certain things that needed to be signed off, the incorporation of a company, foreign investment license, all of those things were done. There were some changes in legislation which affected the shareholding, but ultimately all of those things were done, and the basis on which Turkcell won the bid was that it had a revenue sharing arrangement of 28%, which was almost double what MTN were prepared to pay. It was almost double what MTN's bid was. And once Turkcell were extracted from the consortium and MTN were placed in the consortium, the numbers were exactly the same. MTN are on a 28% revenue sharing arrangement.
When you say MTN or Turkcell rather was extracted, what were the reasons behind that? Just MTN stepping to the plate, or
MTN stepped in?
Well, the allegation is
their allegation is that there was a series of there was interference with their contract through a number of different things. So through the bribes, through the attempt to influence the International Energy Agency, the nuclear things, introduction to South African politicians, introductions to Denel, things like that.
And you have all of this that you're going to present to the court?
Yes, we will.
When will we see the founding affidavits?
Well, the summons has been issued. The summons is in the hands of the sheriff. I did give a copy to MTN's legal representatives, to Weber Wenzel, but that was a courtesy copy. That's not proper service. So the summons is in the hands of the sheriff. It should be served during the course of hopefully today, early next week. They then have an opportunity to deliver a formal notice, but we won't really see what their defence is until, I would think, sometime into next year. Going to a sort of recess period at the courts, so it will be a while before they set out what their defence is.
But the summons presumably carries all of your...
It carries all of our allegations, contains some of the supporting documentation.
And is that now in the public domain?
That's in the public domain.
And is there anything in there that we should know about as South African citizens, as South African media? Any new discovery?
I don't think that there's anything new in it. It's pretty much what was put up in the American complaint, but written as you would write it for a South African court.
So this is all going to base down to whether or not Chris Killowen and Musa are reliable witnesses or not, and you're confident that our courts in South Africa will find that they are reliable?
Yeah. And I mean, it's really very early days. There's a whole discovery process, so we must put up the documentation we've got. MTN must put up the documentation they've got. And the nature of litigation is that witnesses appear.
Just one final point.
So
the timing is interesting. It was a year ago that you decided not to pursue it in the American courts. I'm talking you,
Yes.
Turkcell. Phuthuma Nhleko has only recently, the CEO at the time of the alleged corruption, has only recently become chairman of MTN. Did this play any influence?
No. I'm not sure what the delay was in instructing us. And, yeah.
But there's no settlement here. This is going to court. This is going to be open to the public. We can get hold of the documentation and see exactly what it is that you allege now.
Yes, I'm happy to send it to you. And yeah, we'll get to trial, I would guess, with a bit of luck, probably early in 2015, is my guess. Is going to take,
The wheels of
That's
justice grind
slowly.
slowly. My goodness.
Very. Eric, a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank
No
you very
doubt
much
we'll
for
get
having
you
me.
in for an update very soon. That was Eric van den Berg, who is a partner at Fasken Martin New.